I'll never forget the day I moved into my first apartment with nothing but a tiny concrete balcony, and I thought my vegetable gardening days were over. I was standing there, staring at that empty space, feeling pretty defeated, when I noticed my neighbor had buckets everywhere with tomatoes, peppers, and lettuce growing like crazy. That's when it hit me. You don't need land to grow food, you just need buckets. I started with 5-gallon buckets from the hardware store, and by the end of that summer, I was harvesting more vegetables from my balcony than some people with full-sized gardens were getting from their raised beds. Welcome back to Garden Solace, where we prove that anyone can grow food anywhere. Today, I'm sharing 5 vegetables that grow amazingly well in buckets, producing impressive harvests without requiring a single square foot of land. These aren't just survival crops, these are productive, delicious vegetables that will actually save you money at the grocery store. And if you stick around until the end, I'll reveal which bucket vegetable produced over 40 pounds of food from just 2 buckets on my balcony last year. So go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you're ready to start growing your own food, and drop a comment telling me if you're growing in buckets or planning to start. Let's dive in. Number 1. Tomatoes, the bucket growing champion. Let me start with the absolute best vegetable for bucket growing, and that's tomatoes. I've been growing tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets for 6 years now, and the results have consistently blown my mind. Tomatoes are perfect for containers because they have relatively compact root systems for the amount of fruit they produce. They thrive with excellent drainage that buckets provide, and you can grow them vertically to maximize space. Last year, I grew 6 tomato plants in buckets on my balcony, and I harvested over 120 pounds of tomatoes from those 6 plants. Here's exactly how I set up buckets for tomatoes. I use standard 5-gallon buckets that you can get from hardware stores for about $3 to $5 each, or sometimes free from bakeries or restaurants if you ask nicely. Make sure they're food grade if possible and never contained toxic chemicals. The first critical step is drilling drainage holes, and this is where most people don't drill enough. I drill at least 6 to 8 quarter-inch holes in each bucket, evenly spaced, because tomatoes absolutely hate sitting in waterlogged soil. For soil, I don't use garden dirt because it compacts too much in containers. Instead, I use a high-quality potting mix, or I make my own container mix using equal parts peat moss or coconut coir, vermiculite or perlite, and compost. This mix is light, drains well, and has plenty of organic matter. I fill the bucket to within 2 inches of the top, leaving room for watering. Before planting, I mix in a slow-release organic fertilizer, about a half cup per bucket, because tomatoes are heavy feeders, and the nutrients in potting mix alone won't last the whole season. When selecting tomato varieties for buckets, determinate varieties are generally easier because they stay more compact and produce fruit all at once, but I've had great success with indeterminate varieties too, by using sturdy stakes or cages. My favorite determinate varieties for buckets are Roma, Celebrity, and Bush Early Girl, which all stay relatively compact at 4 to 5 feet tall and produce heavily. For indeterminate types, I love cherry tomatoes like Sun Gold and Sweet Million because they're incredibly productive in containers, and heirloom varieties like Brandywine if I'm willing to provide tall stakes. I plant tomato seedlings deep in the bucket, burying the stem up to the first set of true leaves. Tomatoes can produce roots along any buried stem, so deep planting creates a stronger root system. I install a support system immediately, either a tall stake driven into the bucket or a large tomato cage. As the plant grows, I water deeply whenever the top 2 inches of soil feel dry, which in hot summer weather might be daily. I fertilize every 2 weeks with a liquid organic fertilizer like fish emulsion or compost tea, and I prune suckers on indeterminate varieties to keep them manageable. The results speak for themselves. Each bucket-grown tomato plant produced 15 to 25 pounds of fruit last season, depending on variety. The cherry tomatoes were especially prolific, with each plant giving me over 30 pounds. The fruit quality was excellent, and because buckets warm up faster than ground soil in spring, I actually got earlier harvests than my neighbor who plants in-ground. The only challenges are keeping up with watering during heat waves and ensuring the support structure is sturdy enough for heavy fruit loads. Number 2. Peppers,
perfect size for container growing. Peppers are the second vegetable I always recommend for bucket growing because they're naturally well suited to containers. Pepper plants typically grow 2 to 3 feet tall and have compact root systems that fit perfectly in 5-gallon buckets. I grow both sweet bell peppers and hot peppers in buckets, and they produce just as well, if not better, than garden-grown plants. Last year, each of my pepper plants in buckets produced 8 to 15 large bell peppers or dozens of hot peppers, depending on the variety. The bucket setup for peppers is similar to tomatoes, but with a few differences. I use the same 5-gallon buckets with 6 to 8 drainage holes and the same lightweight potting mix. However, peppers prefer slightly warmer soil than tomatoes, so I often paint my pepper buckets black or dark green to absorb more solar heat. This is especially helpful in cooler climates or for starting plants early in the season. The dark buckets can raise soil temperature by 10 degrees, which peppers love. Pepper plants don't need as much fertilizer as tomatoes, but they do appreciate consistent feeding. I mix a balanced, slow-release fertilizer into the soil at planting, about a half cup per bucket, and then I side dress with compost or liquid feed once a month during the growing season. Peppers are sensitive to both over-fertilization and under-fertilization. Too much nitrogen produces lots of leaves but few peppers, while too little results in yellow leaves and poor fruit set. I've found that a balanced fertilizer with equal NPK ratios works best. My favorite pepper varieties for buckets include California Wonder and Big Bertha for sweet bell peppers, both of which produce large, thick-walled fruits on compact plants. For hot peppers, jalapeno and serrano grow beautifully in containers and produce abundantly. I also love growing ornamental hot peppers like Thai hot or cayenne in buckets because they're both productive and attractive, making them perfect for decorating a patio or balcony while providing food. One advantage peppers have over tomatoes in bucket growing is that they need less support. Most pepper varieties are naturally bushy and self-supporting, though I do stake plants when they're loaded with fruit to prevent branches from breaking. Another advantage is water requirements. Peppers are slightly more drought-tolerant than tomatoes and can handle a day or two of dry soil without major stress, though consistent moisture produces better yields. I space the buckets about 18 to 24 inches apart to ensure good air circulation, which helps prevent fungal diseases. I water when the top inch of soil is dry, usually every 2 to 3 days in summer heat. The plants start producing peppers about 60 to 80 days after transplanting, and they continue producing until frost. I've found that regular harvesting encourages more production, so I pick peppers as soon as they reach full size, even if they haven't changed color yet. Green peppers left on the plant will eventually turn red, yellow, or orange, and while they're sweeter when fully colored, picking them green increases overall yield. Last season, 6 bucket-grown peppers gave me about 70 to 80 pounds of peppers total, which we used fresh, roasted, and froze, and made into hot sauce. The bucket-grown peppers were actually superior to ground-grown ones I'd tried in previous years because the controlled soil conditions and excellent drainage prevented many of the root diseases that can affect peppers in garden beds. Number 3. Lettuce and salad greens, fast-growing and space-efficient. Lettuce and salad greens are perfect for bucket growing, especially if you want quick results and continuous harvests. Unlike tomatoes and peppers that take months to produce fruit, lettuce can be ready to harvest in as little as 4 to 6 weeks, and you can succession plant for harvests all season long. I keep several buckets of lettuce and mixed greens going continuously from spring through fall, and they provide fresh salads for my family almost daily. The great thing about lettuce is you don't need 5-gallon buckets. Smaller 2 to 3-gallon buckets work perfectly, and you can even use one 5-gallon bucket to grow multiple lettuce plants. I drill drainage holes just like with larger vegetables, but I can fit 4 to 6 lettuce plants in one 5-gallon bucket, depending on the variety. Loose leaf lettuce varieties work best for this intensive planting, while head lettuce needs more space, about one plant per 3-gallon bucket. The soil mix for lettuce doesn't need to be as rich as for tomatoes or peppers because lettuce is a light feeder. I use standard potting mix without adding extra fertilizer initially, though I do top dress with a thin layer of compost every few weeks to provide gentle nutrition. Lettuce grows best in cooler weather, so I focus my bucket lettuce production in spring and fall, though I can grow it through summer if the buckets are in partial shade to prevent the soil from overheating, which also causes bolting. Last year, I kept 4 4 5-gallon buckets of rotating lettuce and greens all season. I'd plant new seeds every 2 weeks in one bucket while harvesting from the others, creating a continuous supply. From those 4 buckets, I harvested approximately 15 to 20 pounds of salad greens total over the season, which doesn't sound like much, but given that organic salad mix is $6 to $10 per pound at stores, that's significant savings. Plus, the flavor of fresh-picked lettuce grown in buckets on my balcony was incomparably better than anything from the grocery store. Number 4. Green beans. Vertical growing in minimal space. Green beans, specifically pole beans rather than bush beans, are phenomenal for bucket growing because you can train them vertically and get massive yields from a tiny footprint. I started growing pole beans in buckets 3 years ago, and they've become one of my most productive bucket crops. A single 5-gallon bucket with 3 pole beans and a simple trellis produced over 15 pounds of beans last summer. The bucket setup for pole beans is straightforward but requires planning for vertical support. I use standard 5-gallon buckets
With standard drainage holes and fill them with a well-draining potting mix. Beans are legumes that fix their own nitrogen, so I don't add nitrogen-rich fertilizers. In fact, too much nitrogen produces lots of leaves but few beans. Instead, I add a bit of compost and a phosphorus-rich amendment like bone meal to encourage flowering and pod production. The key to success with bucket beans is the trellis system. I install the trellis before planting so I don't disturb roots later. My favorite method is to place 3 or 4 bamboo stakes or wooden dowels around the inside edge of the bucket, poking them deep into the soil, and then bringing the tops together in a teepee shape, tying them securely with twine. This creates a sturdy structure that can support the weight of mature, producing bean plants. Alternatively, you can place the bucket next to a wall or railing and run strings or netting upward for the beans to climb. I plant 3 to 4 pole bean seeds per bucket, spaced evenly around the perimeter, about 1 inch deep. The seeds germinate in 5 to 10 days, and the plants grow rapidly, often reaching 6 to 8 feet tall. As they grow, I gently train the vines to climb the supports, though they usually figure it out on their own with their twining growth habit. Pole beans need consistent moisture, especially during flowering and pod formation, so I water whenever the top inch of soil feels dry. My favorite pole bean varieties for buckets are Kentucky Wonder, which is a reliable heirloom that produces long, tender green beans over an extended period, and Vortex, which has extra long pods up to 11 inches and exceptional flavor. For something different, I also grow purple-podded pole beans, which are not only productive, but also ornamental with their beautiful purple pods and flowers. Pole beans start producing about 60 days after planting, and if you keep harvesting regularly, they'll continue producing for 2 to 3 months. This is where pole beans really shine over bush beans for container growing. Bush beans produce heavily for 2 to 3 weeks and then stop, requiring replanting for continuous harvest. Pole beans produce steadily over months from the same plants, making them much more space efficient for bucket growers. I harvest beans when they're about 4 to 6 inches long and still tender. Picking every 2 to 3 days encourages more production. Last year, my 3 buckets of pole beans, each with 3 plants, produced about 45 pounds of beans total over a 12-week harvest period. That's from just 3 5-gallon buckets, taking up about 4 square feet of floor space, but growing vertically to 6 feet tall. The space efficiency is incredible, and the beans were delicious, sweet and tender with no stringiness. Number 5. Potatoes, surprising yields from simple buckets. The 5th vegetable I'm recommending for bucket growing is potatoes, and this is the crop I mentioned at the beginning that produced over 40 pounds from just 2 buckets. Most people don't think of potatoes as a container crop, but they're actually fantastic in buckets using a progressive hilling technique. Potatoes grown in buckets are easy to harvest, you just dump out the bucket, and they're perfect for small spaces where ground planting isn't possible. Here's the method I use for potato buckets. I start with 5-gallon buckets and drill even more drainage holes than usual, about 10 to 12 holes, because potatoes are very sensitive to waterlogged soil and will rot if drainage is poor. I fill the bucket with only about 6 inches of potting mix initially, not all the way to the top. Then I place 2 to 3 seed potatoes on top of that 6 inches of soil and water well. Within 2 to 3 weeks, green shoots emerge above the soil.
Here's the key technique. As the shoots grow to about 8 to 10 inches tall, I add more soil to the bucket, covering the lower leaves but leaving the top 4 to 6 inches of growth exposed. This process is called hilling, and it encourages the plant to produce more potatoes along the buried stem. I repeat this hilling process every 2 weeks, adding 4 to 6 inches of soil each time until the bucket is filled nearly to the top. The result is that potatoes form at multiple levels throughout the bucket rather than just at the bottom, dramatically increasing yields. I use a high-quality potting mix for this because regular garden soil compacts too much and restricts potato development. The loose, fluffy potting mix allows the tubers to expand easily and produces beautiful, smooth potatoes. For variety selection, I've had the best success with Yukon Gold and Red Pontiac varieties in buckets. These are determinate varieties that work well with the hilling method. I've also tried Kennebec with good results. Each bucket needs full sun, at least 6 to 8 hours daily, and consistent moisture is crucial, especially during tuber formation. I water deeply whenever the top 2 inches of soil feels dry. The plants will flower about 2 months, which indicates potatoes are forming. I let the plants grow until the foliage naturally yellows and dies back, usually 3 to 4 months after planting. Then comes the fun part. I tip the bucket on its side and dump everything out. The potatoes tumble out clean and easy to collect, no digging required. Last year, my 3 buckets of pole beans, each with 3 plants, produced about 45 pounds of beans total over a 12-week harvest period. That's from just 3 5-gallon buckets, taking up about 4 square feet of floor space, but growing vertically to 6 feet tall. The space efficiency is incredible, and the beans were delicious, sweet and tender with no stringiness. Bonus tips: setting up your bucket garden for success. Before we wrap up, let me share some crucial tips that apply to all bucket vegetable growing and will dramatically improve your success. First, bucket placement matters enormously. Most vegetables need at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sun, so position your buckets where they'll get maximum light. On a balcony or patio, this usually means placing them along the railing or edge where buildings block sun. I use a sun calculator app to track exactly how much sun different spots get throughout the day. Second, watering is the biggest challenge with bucket growing because containers dry out much faster than garden beds. I've learned to check moisture daily by sticking my finger 2 inches into the soil. If it's dry at that depth, it's time to water. During hot summer weather, I often water twice daily, morning and evening. To reduce watering frequency, I mulch the soil surface in each bucket with an inch or 2 of shredded leaves or straw, which slows evaporation dramatically. I've also installed a simple drip irrigation system with a timer for my buckets, which cost about $60 and was one of the best investments I've made. Third, don't underestimate the importance of good drainage. I learned this the hard way when I lost an entire bucket of tomatoes to root rot because I didn't drill enough holes. Now I drill a minimum of 6 to 8 quarter-inch holes in every bucket bottom, and I elevate buckets slightly on bricks or pot feet so water can drain freely underneath. Never let buckets sit in standing water. Fourth, fertilization schedules differ for containers versus ground growing. Container plants need more frequent feeding because nutrients wash out with watering. I feed heavy feeders like tomatoes and peppers every 2 weeks during active growth with a balanced liquid fertilizer or compost tea. Light feeders like lettuce get monthly feeding. I also refresh the top few inches of potting mix every year by removing and replacing it with fresh compost-enriched mix. Fifth, consider the weight factor. A 5-gallon bucket filled with moist soil, a plant, and produce can weigh 40 to 60 pounds. Make sure your balcony or surface can handle the weight of multiple buckets. I consulted my building management before setting up my balcony bucket garden to ensure I wasn't exceeding weight limits. Sixth, use food-grade buckets when possible, especially for vegetables like potatoes and lettuce where you're eating the part that's in direct contact with soil. Many non-food grade buckets have contained chemicals that can leach into soil and be absorbed by plants. The safest source is food-grade buckets from restaurants or bakeries. Finally, succession planting is your friend for maximizing production. As soon as I harvest lettuce or beans from a bucket, I clean out the old roots, refresh the soil with compost, and plant something new. This way, my buckets are productive for 8 to 9 months of the year, rather than just one growing season. So, there you have it. 5 vegetables that thrive in buckets with no land required. Tomatoes for incredible yields and versatility, peppers for compact productivity, lettuce for quick harvests, green beans for vertical space efficiency, and potatoes for surprising bucket performance. With just a few 5-gallon buckets, some quality potting mix, and these 5 vegetables, you can produce a significant amount of fresh food from a balcony, patio, driveway, or any sunny spot with no garden required. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 vegetables are you most excited to grow in buckets? Do you already have experience with container vegetable gardening, or will this be your first time? Drop a comment below and share your plans or questions. And don't forget to tell me what country you're watching from. If this video inspired you to start a bucket garden, please hit that like button and subscribe to Garden Solace for more practical growing advice. Click the notification bell so you catch our next video, where I'll be showing you exactly how to set up a drip irrigation system for container gardens. Thanks so much for watching, and happy bucket gardening, everyone.